Okay. All right. Well, then let's begin. It's really fabulous to see you all here, and thank you for joining us. We are in our November meeting of the Equity Advisory Group for the Interstate Bridge Project. And Jake, will you put up the slides for me? Oh, and if we haven't already opened the YouTube channel, please do. Closed captions are in English and Spanish. English saved captions are available within Zoom and YouTube. Users can follow this link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. ibr.news/captions. How to access closed captions in Zoom. At the bottom middle of your screen, you should see a menu of options. If you can't see the menu, hover your mouse over the bottom middle of the screen. Click on the CC icon and a separate window with captions will appear. Reminders, we love your faces. We encourage EAG members to turn on your video. Please say your name when you begin to speak. And if you experience the technical difficulties, please contact program staff at 360-329-6744. Public comment. There'll be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting today. To submit input after the meeting, email comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line, or call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. So for our agenda today, we have our program administrator update with Greg Johnson. We have design options overview and discussion, more about our equity framework, and public comment. And then we close. So passing to Greg Johnson, our program administrator, to give us our program update.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It has been a busy month since we last met. So we are in the process of rolling out to all of the groups, and you guys will see tonight our design options as well as our screening criteria and the process of how we will whittle down those things, taking into account the equity issues are surrounding those issues into account. So this is why I say we're at a inflection point in the program. So we need to make sure that folks are engaged and making their voice heard as we start digging into what these options are and how they will be screened. So going to be tremendously important. Desired outcomes as well. We are going to be talking about what are the things that we want to see out of this program. So I'm excited for this part of the program. We're still looking at sometime next spring having the IBR solution or a locally preferred alternative. We're kind of transitioning our language to have some decisions made and moving us into the supplemental environmental impact statement process. So very key critical that all of our advisory groups as well as the public have their voices heard. So we are also, if you haven't been on the website, go to the website at interstatebridge.org. We have our survey out there that folks need to hear about and need to participate in. You folks are more than welcome, even though you're part of the internal team that's helping move this. Your voice is still needs to be reflected in those surveys that are out there.
And Greg, real quick, we did send out a specific link that both the EAG and the community advisory group for you to use to complete the survey, just so that we can categorize them as being from our advisory groups, so that it's a little bit of a special designation as far as what that feedback is that we get. So if you didn't get that email or didn't see it, let me know. But yeah, that link is just for you all, and please take it when you get a minute.
Thank you, Jake. That's key critical. Like I said, that your voices are heard in this process. So we have been before the executive steering group as well as the BiState legislative group to start exposing them and socializing them to the design options, screening criteria, as well as desired outcomes. And we received very positive comments from those groups. We also know that some of our partner agencies are concerned about do they have enough information to say yes to us? So we are hearing that conversation, and we are trying to get our heads wrapped around what does that mean for our timetable. So we are still working towards that grand regional consensus with everybody saying that they can live with what we have put on the table for them. So we are going to be talking to the executive steering group this Thursday. We will be talking to them, and next Tuesday we will be talking to the BiState legislative team and showing them some of the results of the modeling, and once again talking to them about how we screen and make choices going forward. We also are talking, we have the community working groups that are looking at some in-depth questions and answering those for us. Those groups serve as kind of a sounding board for the community at large. So they're looking at downtown Vancouver. They're looking at Hayden Island. They're looking at the commuter experience. So all of those things are key, critical, and important to this program. Also, they're looking at active transportation in the corridor and what that means. So a lot of things going on, and I will take any questions that you have now about what's going on in the last month or what's coming up. So we can give the bulk of the time to the presenters that's going to be walking you through some of the dense information that we have today. So any questions or concerns? You guys are shy tonight. Well, once again, a lot of activities going on, and we need to make sure your voices are heard and amplified in the discussion. So as we go forward and this information is presented, be sure to not walk out of these meetings with any unanswered questions. So please ask the questions, and our team will take whatever time is necessary to break it down and explain it, and so we can move forward with some of the issues we have on the plate before us. So with that, I'm gonna flip it back to you, Dr. Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I'm gonna pass it to Jake, and you're gonna give us the community action group, their update. Is that correct?
Yes,
or no?
Correct. So since John L is going to be joining a little bit later, but figured we, as usual, keep you apprised of what your fellow advisory group members are doing. So their last meeting was held on November 4th, and they also discussed desired outcomes and screening criteria. They're a little, as far as you all on the equity framework and climate framework, they're trying to get up to speed as they've had some other items they've been focusing on, and so they're going to be talking about the climate framework and how that's incorporated at their next meeting. And then they received the same presentation that you'll be getting today on design options, to really go into a little bit more depth about what has been developed there. Their discussion at the last meeting, the kind of the highlights, they talked a lot about cost. They talked a lot about, right sizing the bridge, so making it the appropriate, I guess, footprint and really meeting the need of what the region is trying to solve. Looking at the impacts of whatever option is decided upon for an interchange at Hayden Island and what those impacts might be on the community. And then they did want to hear more about how options are going to be screened for equity. So we'll be following up with them to talk more in depth about that and what this group went through to develop those screening criteria. And so that's at their next meeting on December 2nd. And those are, just like these meetings, open to the public. You can watch them on YouTube, and all the materials are posted on the website. So feel free to engage with that group and be in touch with us with any questions or ideas about how we really coordinate the two groups together to make sure that we're getting the full extent of community input that we can into the process. So that is that. Greg, I didn't queue you up for this, but maybe you can real quick. You mentioned the BiState Legislative Committee, but just kind of a quick reminder about what that is for the group.
Yeah, so for the folks who don't know, we have the BiState Legislative Committee is comprised of 16 members, 8 from each state, and they represent both the state Senate as well as the state House of Representatives. So these are the folks who are key critical to making sure that they understand all of the things, because what they will be doing is taking this back to their fellow members eventually for funding and putting a funding package on the table to be approved for the local share of this program. So we are making sure that we are touching base with them on a regular basis. We've been meeting monthly, and we hope to continue that until they are in session. And as soon as they get out of session, to resolve it or to rejoin that type of aggressive schedule. So they are asking great questions. The presentation we made to them on design options and screening criteria was very well received. We're going to do the modeling 101 so they can understand what eventually they may be voting on to fund. So this is a key critical time. One of the other issues that has put us on the clock is, as some of you may have seen today, the president signed the infrastructure funding bill that's going to bring dollars out to the states. So we need to be sure that we are ready to be a part of that discussion. So it's time to move this forward. I tell folks we have been talking about this for almost a quarter of a century. So we do not want to kick this can down the road for the next generation of folks to have to wrestle with. So my take is we're going to get it done this time, and we're going to attract those federal dollars here to the Pacific Northwest to get this project built. So thank you for that reminder, Jake.
Jake?
Oh, just back to you. I don't have anything more to say here, but I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item.
All right. All right.
Let me pull that up. There we go. I try to take down the slides whenever I can so that we can feel more like we are humans in a room together.
All right, so now we get to work with Alex Prentice, the cross-discipline coordination lead, who's going to walk us through the preliminary list of design options, which is pretty exciting. So please take it away, Alex.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. It's always a treat to come to our community events and equity advisory group. So as Greg and others have said, and as you've followed along with us, a lot of work was done in the previous planning efforts. We're continuing that work in our design options. We are making sure that everything that we did before hasn't gone by the wayside. So the previous project's record of decision approved a replacement bridge, improvements to 7 interchanges in a 5-mile corridor, and high capacity transit. The prior federal decision is still valid. However, there have been a lot of changes to baseline conditions, regulatory and policy context, and community priorities, all since 2013. Some of those changes include expanded transit service in Vancouver through the Vine BRT and Bus on Shoulder. There have been changes in regulations and requirements by various agencies like the U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Federal Aviation Administration, regional, state, and local equity and climate priorities, land use policy, freight and industrial activity, and then demographics along the I-5 corridor and nearby neighborhoods. So next slide, please. So again, the baseline conditions, some have changed. The previous planning did incorporate into its design a lot of the physical changes that have taken place since 2013, including the downtown Vancouver waterfront, but there still need to be some adjustments as we go through our design. So the design options that we're going to present tonight, we're going to give an overview of them, and they were created by the design team, but very much in collaboration with the agency partners to make sure that whatever we're doing is reflecting these changes and incorporating current community values, especially equity and climate considerations. Next slide, please. So we're going to begin by looking at the alignment options for the bridge over the Columbia River and the bridge configuration options. So each of the 3 options has different trade-offs, high-level trade-offs in terms of footprint and constructability, but they each provide dedicated space for transit and for the shared use path. So active transportation is something that's going to be part of every single design that we have. That's a really critical component for us, as is transit. So again, these are high-level options. They're going to require a lot of refinement and screening to identify the differences and trade-offs on a more granular level. So the future design work is going to be informed by data, our project partner agencies. Our community engagement is also going to be focused on bridge alignment and type. So here we have the first option on the left is the 2013 locally preferred alternative from the previous project. Oregon is on the left and Washington is on the right. So the 2 dark lines that you see there represent 2 side-by-side bridges which curve as they cross the Columbia River. If you were able to take a slice of this bridge, you would see that the upstream or eastern bridge has I-5 northbound traffic on top and utilities in a shared use path on the bottom. The downstream or western bridge has southbound I-5 on top and high capacity transit on the bottom. So option 2, this straight alignment option, that's something that we've developed during this program, and it aimed to straighten the curved bridge alignment over the river. So this helps us with structural efficiencies and a shorter bridge length. It is still 2 bridges side by side, and the configuration is the same as in the 2013 LPA. So you have the lanes on top, and you have the high capacity transit, utilities, and shared use path on the bottom of those 2 side-by-side bridges. Option 3 is the most different. We call that the stacked alignment option. It consolidates the 2 bridges into one, which could reduce the amount of in-water work. So this alignment is straight across, like option 2. The configuration puts I-5 on top and the northbound I-5 on the bottom with transit and the shared use path. There are other difficulties with this, including potential issues with access in downtown Vancouver. So we're looking really closely at all of these options to see which ones are going to be the most beneficial for the community and that are going to improve transportation and transit access.
Alex, really quick, sorry, but just want to flag for you all as we're going through this. I should have voiced this, but the discussion questions that we'll get to as we discuss in small groups are, thinking about these and whether they have, whether you can see any potential differences between the options in terms of the overall kind of transportation and economic benefits from an equity perspective, but also potential harms or other impacts that could occur relative to each other. So just try to keep that in mind as Alex is going through these. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. And again, it's really important to remember that all of these provide pedestrian and bike connections east and west in Vancouver. So I also wanted to make sure that that's clear. It's not always easy to tell with these higher level diagrams that there are those connections. So next slide, please. We're going to look at the Hayden Island and Marine Drive interchange. Oh, we have the downtown Vancouver. Okay, so we have downtown Vancouver. There are options that are considering the ways to connect downtown into a higher I-5 corridor. So this would be necessary for any bridge replacement option. All of the design options that we're looking at are connecting the transit and multi-use path to downtown Vancouver. We are still trying to figure out how to connect from downtown into the river crossing options. And that's part of all of the design work that we're doing now with our partners, and it's going to be part of our screening process. So it's constantly this iterative process of developing design options and improving upon them with the feedback of our community, with you, and with the project partners. Okay, next slide, please. So our Vancouver interchanges, this is not different from our 2013 project. It's going to reconstruct the interchanges with braided ramps and auxiliary lanes at Mill Plain and Fourth Plain. It replaces overpasses at other locations along I-5 leading up to the river. Again, all designs are going to improve bike and pedestrian connections to improve east to west travel. And then go ahead.
Alex, could you explain to the group what a braided ramp is and what it does?
I actually was wondering, yes, I was actually wondering that terminology being in here. But a braided ramp is intended to reduce congestion and to help for a smoother on-off when we're getting on and off of the highway. Does that help, Greg?
That does.
Okay, all right. So basically everything we're doing, you can count on everything we're doing is aimed at reducing congestion, improving through traffic, improving access for pedestrians and bikes, and then of course, ameliorating the transit situation. So that's a given. If you're ever seeing a technical term, you can pretty much guarantee that its purpose is to make everything better. So that's my blanket statement for the evening. So future design work is going to continue to refine the mill plane and fourth plane intersection improvements and the bike pedestrian connections. And again, just to reiterate, these are really high level design options. This is what we need right now in 2021 and 2022. There are going to be manifold opportunities to continue to provide input as to how these designs are going to look and feel on the ground through the design process up to construction.
Alex,
Next
would you
slide.
also mind just quickly going through where these crossings are shown on this map? Or I can, if it's a little blurry, I think I can read.
Yeah, I think my screen is a little bit small.
Okay. So this has, and just to be clear, even though it's oriented left to right is north and south. So a little different than you might normally see on a map. So the up and down is east-west, and there are east-west bike ped crossings at Evergreen Boulevard, at Mill Plain Boulevard, McLaughlin, 4th Plane, I believe that's 29th Avenue, and then 33rd Avenue and 39th Avenue. Those are what's shown here.
Thank you, Jake. I would like to say that I have all of those memorized at this point, but I don't. I do know about Evergreen because it goes from the library across, but I don't know about the other. I don't know all of the numbers. So thank you. Okay, next slide. Now we're looking at Hayden Island and Marine Drive. So these are two interchanges that we've focused on a lot over the last couple of months as we've developed the design. Again, just like all of our design options, each of these incorporate different ways to access Hayden Island by walking, biking, rolling, on transit, and by car. And they're looking at how we're going to connect the local streets under I-5. So unlike the 2013 design, all of these options include replacing the I-5 North Portland Harbor Bridge between mainland Oregon and Hayden Island. Future design work is going to be informed by, again, our advisory groups, our partners, and community engagement. And those will include more details on connecting shared use paths. And it is intended that we are going to connect to the 40-mile loop trail. So if we look at option 1 all the way to the left, that is the full interchange option. So it has a full interchange at Hayden Island and a full interchange at Marine Drive. So this means that travel in all directions to and from I-5 are provided by ramps at both locations. So you can go northbound and southbound, and you can access I-5 via ramps that get onto that at both Marine Drive and Hayden Island. There are local street grid connections provided on Hayden Island and in the Bridgeton area. There are some variations within this option for how these local streets are configured, and some include a third connection under I-5 on Hayden Island at Tomahawk Island Drive. We're going to be fleshing those out in more detail during the screening process so that you'll have a much better idea of what those different configurations look like. But the main thrust of this design is that there are these full interchanges that allow for full northbound and southbound access to I-5 at both Marine Drive and Hayden Island. So option 2 is a partial interchange. So this means that there's only ramps to and from the north on Hayden Island. So a vehicle on Hayden Island can enter I-5 to go north, and a vehicle on I-5 can exit to Hayden Island if they are traveling from the north. There is still a full interchange at I-5 and Marine Drive. So you can get off Marine Drive there, you could go over the North Portland Harbor Bridge and access Hayden Island. So an arterial or local bridge is how access, I meant an arterial bridge, not North Portland Harbor Bridge. We have North Portland Harbor Bridge, but this is how access between Marine Drive and Hayden Island would be accomplished. This is how vehicles could move between Hayden Island and I-5 in the directions not already provided by the partial interchange. This configuration reduces the overall width and the footprint of the infrastructure over Hayden Island and North Portland Harbor, as opposed to the full interchange option, which has a slightly larger footprint. So option 3, go ahead, Greg.
So So Alex, I just wanted to point out that there is a lot of trade-offs, and one of the reasons for looking at this array of interchange options is for two reasons. Number one is to make sure that the island is reconnected and is not being imposed upon as it currently is with a complex interchange. But also, we're looking at this as the possibility of looking at the number of auxiliary lanes, and will any of these configurations change that need? But as you can see, as you go away from a full interchange on Hayden Island, you have to start building more complex other pieces of infrastructure to get these movements made from the island. So continue on, Alex, just my commentary and editorial.
Thank you. That is really helpful context. I mean, and that is one thing that we are really trying to do over the next few months, using this screening process to look at and say, all right, there's a lot of benefits to this option, to the full interchange, for example. It is making the no interchange, for example, has a smaller footprint. But how do you get to and from Hayden Island? It's a lot more complicated, and it adds a lot more difficulty in terms of getting on and off. So that is exactly what we're hoping to do. And that's why some of your feedback is so important, so that we can identify from your perspective what these trade-offs are. So we have the no interchange, that's option 3, and that is still a full interchange at Marine Drive, but no interchange on Hayden Island from to or from I-5. So the access to and from Hayden Island would be via Marine Drive and then local bridges rather than via I-5. So again, this option really minimizes the footprint over Hayden Island in North Portland Harbor because there are fewer ramps, but it might make access more challenging. Okay.
And Alex, I'll also just real quick, just so we're clear, we're talking mostly here about just access via vehicle. So yeah, as far as access via transit or bicycle, walking, those are different.
Okay, yes, thank you. That's important to note. And again, it's really hard to see sometimes on these high level maps that we do already have active transportation incorporated into our designs. So thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So we're getting into the transit options now. Currently, we have our light rail in Portland with the Max Yellow line, and that stops at Expo Center currently. And then in Vancouver, we have the Vine Bus Rapid Transit, and that has its southernmost stop in downtown Vancouver at Turtle Place. We're now looking at a bunch of different transit options that include light rail, bus rapid transit, a hybrid of light rail and bus rapid transit, and then a bus on shoulder. So these are all under consideration as we move forward into the screening process. Analysis and modeling is going to include measures such as ridership, travel time, reliability, and the cost. So these are some of the metrics that we're going to use to shape our decision about what the transit typology would be. So that's the mode and what the system would look like as a whole. The transit options are also going to be screened to understand how they perform against the program's equity and climate goals. So a lot of that data and analysis is then going to be used to say, is this transit option an equitable option? Is this a climate friendly option? And that's going to be a really, really important metric when we're thinking about the benefits and challenges of each option. So again, the future design work, because we have a lot of it to go, this is just the very preliminary stages, is going to be informed by data, by our agency partners, by the community, and by our advisory groups. And that's going to help us decide the exact transit station details, what it's going to look and feel like, and also the park and ride locations and size. So we have our 4 light rail transit options. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Oh, okay. I thought it was the whole thing. Could you go back? Is there a light rail in like 4 slides? in my other presentation, we have light rail coming first. Yes. Okay. So we have the 4 light rail options. And so these are just light rail. We have Oregon, we have again, the Max Yellow line, which terminates at Expo Center. And so these different options for light rail would extend the light rail system from Expo Center to someplace in Vancouver on the other side of the river, depending on which option. So in 2013, the locally preferred alternative had light rail extending from the Expo Center all the way up to a terminus near Clark College. We now have 3 other light rail options that we're considering. One would be from Expo Center to Turtle Place in downtown Vancouver. One would be from Expo Center all the way up to McLaughlin, and that would be a dedicated guideway adjacent to I-5. And then lastly, we'd have light rail extending from Expo Center to Kiggins Bowl, and again, in a dedicated guideway adjacent to I-5. And it's worth noting that all of the high capacity transit options are separated by traffic and are on a separate guideway. So those are our 4 light rail options. Could go to the BRT options, please. So we've had this major context change in which Vancouver has really expanded its bus rapid transit service. And we want to make sure that whatever our transit solution is, it's tying in seamlessly with that service. So this would be bus rapid transit, and it would take bus rapid transit from Vancouver down south to Portland. So in this, we would have the first one, it would be extending down to a terminus near Expo from Turtle Place, which again is the southernmost terminus currently for BRT. We have another one that would be going down from Kiggins Bowl to the Expo Center, and that would be on a guideway adjacent to I-5, so running parallel with traffic. And then there's another option that's a dedicated BRT connection through the central business district of downtown Vancouver. So we would have the BRT extending via a dedicated guideway again from McLaughlin through Vancouver Central Business District before crossing the river to Hayden Island with a terminus near Expo Center. So you see that the termini are the same, but the alignment is different because this one stops in downtown Vancouver. Okay, we have a hybrid option next. Sorry for making you search. We have one more. Okay, so yes, here is our hybrid option. So this takes the best of both worlds in some ways, and it brings them together on Hayden Island. So we have our BRT Vine line extending to Hayden Island, where you can then get off and move over to the light rail to take you into downtown Portland. Both of these would be on dedicated guideways. So you'd get off at Hayden Island if you were coming from Vancouver, from your dedicated guideway, and then you'd get back on and you'd get onto the light rail and you'd go down to Expo Center and beyond. So that is the hybrid solution. We don't have light rail going into Vancouver, and we don't have bus rapid transit going all the way into Portland. And then bus on shoulder. That's the last one. Okay, so this is assuming that our CTRAN express routes 101 and 1056 operate as buses on shoulder in the bridge influence area in both directions. The difference between a bus on shoulder and the bus rapid transit is that there's no dedicated guideway. We're still hoping to remove them from overall congestion by putting them on the shoulder, but they're still really going to be in traffic. Realistically, they could get caught in traffic. It could cause more congestion. And if there were an accident, for example, it would obviously affect the buses. So Route 101 currently operates from downtown Vancouver to downtown Portland, and Route 105X operates from Salmon Creek on 99th to downtown Portland. So that's the bus on shoulder option. Again, no dedicated guideway. It's operating on the shoulder of the highway, both northbound and southbound. Next slide, please. I think that's all. I think we're going to breakout rooms now.
First, we'll let's see, because I think Roberta keeps getting kind of kicked out as having some internet connectivity issues. But Roberta, are you here?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I am, at least for this moment.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah. So I think we maybe could we just have about 5 minutes of questions? Does that work before I know we have more than that, but would people, how about we take a moment to just have some questions to help kind of digest this big meal that we just ate?
Can we go back to the slides and I'm specifically interested in the interchange slide. I guess I have a question around not really being a designer and understanding what exists now versus what would change in each of these scenarios. So would it completely look different than what exists now for the full, partial, or no interchange? What would look different compared to what we have now? And I think it's not this one, it's the, well, maybe it is this one. I'm not sure.
Are you thinking about the Vancouver side or about the Hayden Island Marine Tech? I guess either, if there's interchanges.
Right, yes.
So I am going to look to Greg to help me with this because I'm not as familiar with the current conditions as I am with the design options. But again, the main difference is going to be that there are active transportation connections throughout. There's going to be transit connections getting on and off the highway as well. So you're going to have that ability. And then you're going to have these reduced congestion through the use of through lanes and auxiliary lanes getting on and off of the highway. So that's like a broad strokes overview. In terms of how it would look and feel, I'm not totally sure what the difference is.
So if you've been on the island lately, and if you get off and get on, it is a convoluted mess. And the interchange takes up a large portion. There's a ODOT inspection facility that sits in the midst of the interchange existing. So all of that gets cleaned up, and with the full interchange, it's a cleaner look for how this interchange interacts with the island. And there are some local roads that, if you look at the full interchange, you'll see that north-south road, and I can't make out the name of it, but that would actually go under the ramps and the main interchange or the main freeway to connect the island better. Some of the other things that you see, once again, the transit connections as well as the active transportation connections make a lot more sense. Now there's convoluted ways to get up on the bridge if you're riding your bike or walking. This all gets cleaned up into a more simpler way. And that's any of the three options here does that for the community. One of the things that I know our team is looking at, and you can't tell here, the existing Portland Harbor Bridge, that's that goes over the channel to the left. It carries I-5 from the south side of Hayden Island to mainland Portland. With that bridge being replaced, that gives us some flexibility as to how we can make that connection and how we can either raise the grade of that bridge to have a lesser impact on the floating home community and maybe give some more opportunities for better connectivity on Hayden Island. So that's some of the things that we're hearing from the working group and some of the folks who sit on the community advisory group of what they envision for for Hayden Island. One of the complications is that the businesses on Hayden Island do not like to see folks. So on the no interchange, folks would have to drive past their businesses and make kind of a U movement to get back to the island. And they think that that may be too adverse of a movement to attract the type of business that's necessary to keep them going on Hayden Island. So that's part of the discussion that's going on in the community working groups. So, but a lot of intricacies that are wrapped around these interchange designs, but all of them will make life better. Any one of them chosen will make life better for folks who live on the island and make their access better and reconnect the island in better ways.
I'm really happy I phoned a friend. Thank you.
This is Matt. I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So I want to thank Alex for the presentation and trying to describe that as best as possible. And I know that the equity group and the community engagement group have done the same. But because I do represent the blind, low vision, and deafblind community on the EAG, as well as making sure that they are able to have a voice in the feedback, I would like to know the status of the 3D tactile model for these options and renderings, because that was a commitment that was made to me and to the community as we got started, because that feedback sounds like it's going to be really necessary to have that feedback as soon as possible. And so I just wanted to kind of get an understanding of where we're at with the tactile model.
Jake?
That's
Okay, good. Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say it's a great question. We need to get it done. I'm not sure of where they are at with that. But Alex, I don't know if you are aware of where the team is at with that, but we will make an inquiry and get an answer for you.
Yeah.
And then I just want to make sure that,
go ahead, sorry.
I just wanted to also say that I want to make sure that that feedback is received and that we're not moving forward with the process until that feedback is received, because again, that was a commitment, and I want to make sure that the feedback goes in line with the rest of the community's feedback and not after the fact. So if we could get an update, that would be great.
Understood. We'll make it happen.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, this is
Yeah, Sabrina.
Sabrina with Metro. Thank you for sharing the information. I think this is like where the project starts to get real and we can start to kind of envision what we've been talking about for a long time. I'm curious, I guess for me, it raises a process question, and I'm wondering, we had, the EAG had submitted kind of our recommendations for the screening criteria, and I'm wondering like how, are we going to get a report back on like what ends up being the official screening criteria and how our input was incorporated and kind of where that all lands? And then I'm just also, I guess, related to that or building from that, kind of process-wise, we have the design options, we'll run them through screening criteria, but then I also know we're going to be developing the performance measures. And so, at what point in the process do we go to run through both of those kind of gates, all of the options, or do we start to eliminate some based on the screening criteria?
So, Alex, you want to take this or you want me to jump in?
Well, I have the answer, I think, to the second part, but the first part in terms of the report, I'm not totally, Jake, maybe you have a better response to that.
Yeah, that's something that, so in the letter that Dr. Hunt provided to the program, requested that we get regular reports back on results of screening. That is something that that we've committed to doing once we get to that phase of doing the screening. And so yes, I know that the equity screening criteria are in there, and we also in that letter requested that it receive the proper weighting so that it doesn't get lost amongst other screening criteria, even though there are other important considerations, but we are centering equity. So that is certainly a key accountability piece that the program staff will provide updates as those results and process goes forward.
So are you saying that the screening criteria that we put together is the screening criteria for the equity components, or is there another like phase of kind of smashing all the feedback from the different places together that still is going to kind of form what's the official screening criteria?
So there's the screening criteria that really hones in on equity, and then there are criteria that are geared towards the climate outcomes, and then there's some that are around other outcomes like safety and mobility generally. I think maybe Alex and Greg can speak to some others, but there's a few categories. I'd be happy to provide the most recent kind of full-blown list of everything, but yes, there's a package. Does that answer the question?
I think so.
One other piece that's there is that there will be a spreadsheet that details how each option performed for certain items for equity. So if, let's say that no interchange was chosen, so all of the equity screening criteria that was created, we will have a spreadsheet that will score and say, okay, does this option meet the equity expectations of the team? So there will be a spreadsheet that eventually will have all of that information for every option, as well as the other screening criteria as well reflected. So.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that in addition, so that's exactly right, Greg, in terms of what you'll be able to look at these design options and you'll be able to see how each of them performs. So you can look up a screening criterion. One might be equity centered, one might be mobility. There's a lot of overlap, and say, okay, so no interchange. It did really well in this footprint. I can see that X mark here, but it doesn't do very well in active transportation access or something like. We have not done the screening yet, so please don't take that as true. But I also wanted to add that in addition to having these equity screening criteria in this separate section, we do have a bunch of other screening criteria, many of which are also relevant to equity. And so we have called out for each of those screening criteria where it's applicable to equity, so that you can actually see, okay, so we have our equity screening criteria that we developed in the EAG, but if you look up here under safety, for example, there might be 3 screening criteria that are also relevant to equity and or climate. So it's not only its own equity criteria, it's really infused into every single way that we're looking at these design options. And I think this, oh, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just for your info. So we did, as the EAG subgroup that focused on screening criteria, we did go through those that were marked as having a tie to equity, even though,
oh, good. Okay.
and kind of assess, like, does it support our equity objectives, and tried to refine them so that they did as best as possible. So just for your information.
Okay, perfect. I wasn't in the equity subgroup,
right,
but
right.
now it's illuminated for all of the group. And then Sabrina, I think you had a second part of your question, which is how are these being used to narrow down design options? Was that, so we are taking all of these screening criteria now, and we're applying it to the different design options. So let's take Hayden Island and Marine Drive, for example. We're going to have multiple different design options that we're looking at. We have a couple under the half interchange, a couple under the full interchange, and then the no interchange. They're going to be input into this matrix in a column. And then again, they're going to be scored according to whatever criteria. So there might be an equity focused one, or there might be one like, is this going to be constructible? And so design option 1 might say, this scores really poorly here. Design option 2 say, well, this scores really well. And then so on. And then you look at the holistic whole once you have all of the data and the performing looked in, and you say, okay, so let's look. We have all of these metrics. We have all of this data. We can really see now how each design option is performing and what kind of benefits and challenges it has. And that's how we can winnow down into the design option. So I hope that that helps, and that will help us determine the one Hayden Island Marine Drive interchange solution just for that particular location anyways.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Meg. I have a quick question, clarifying, I think, generally. For the transit options in general, for the public transit options, is it a winner takes all? Is it a matched approach? Are we going to have more than one of these? Could we have the BRT and a light rail system, both options that are being presented? Could we have both? Could we have just one?
So that's a good question. And so to your first question, can we have one that is both? And yes, we have that hybrid option. And that's where the light rail meets the BRT on Hayden Island. So that is the hybrid integrated. Because they're on these dedicated guideways, it's really hard, and because of station size and just access, it's really hard to be having a light rail and a BRT that are operating across the alignment. And they're also two different owner operators. So we have TriMet and we have CTRAN. So there is a hybrid option where they might meet in the middle. But otherwise, generally, it's one light rail that's going across, or it's going to be a BRT that's going across. Does that help clarify, Meg?
Yes, it certainly does. And just to clarify as well, if we were to go with any of just the light rail options, there, at least on the drawing, there is not currently a stop at, like, on Hayden Island. Is that going to be correct going forward if that is the option that is chosen, or will there be a station stop on the island itself?
There will be a station stop on the island.
Okay.
Yeah, for any of our options. Go ahead, Greg.
And I was just going to say, whatever is built is actually going to be a hybrid system of both.
Yeah.
We know that Bus Rapid Transit is successfully operating, and there's plans to expand it. So as light rail, if light rail is chosen to go across the bridge into downtown Vancouver, we know that there will be a combination system that BRT will feed light rail at some point. That point has not been determined as of yet. So yeah, both systems will be viable for use.
And also, just to add to that, while there might not be both high capacity transit systems operating simultaneously in the same place, having a light rail system does not preclude having express buses or buses on shoulder. So there's always going to be that hybrid aspect of it, that you're always going to still have the 101 or the 1056.
That is very helpful. Thank you very much.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I think for me, it's just kind of process of equity application. Like, who would be sitting over there with equity expertise? Is it the program team that will be saying, okay, we know you use the equity criteria, but will you have equity specialists that will be sitting to help with a process of scoring so that there could be some even deeper analysis, because you can say, okay, we use the criteria and we think it scores on equity, but you kind of need a subject matter expert constantly to be able to weigh, well, how equitable is that truly? How will that vetting take place?
So that's a really good question, and we are very lucky in that we have Jake working 24/7 with all of our teams to make sure that equity is advocated for at every step of the way. So yes, during the screening process, we will have Jake, and we will also be working with our partner agencies and taking into account what their priorities are in the equity sphere. And so they will also be contributing to that. Jake, I don't know what the plan is for them bringing back the screening to this group, if there is one, but that's a great question. And it is absolutely a priority that we have the right people looking at it.
Yeah, happy to speak with that. And I'll speak to that. I'll call out Emily as well, who just joined the team. So we are in the middle of some of that right now, looking at it's tied to the screening criteria, but it is also bigger than that, looking at, for example, what the differences are in access to jobs given different design options via transit, via driving, and by specific demographic populations according to our equity definition. Also looking at within the half-mile walking distance of transit stations on the different options. What are the demographics of those neighborhoods, and how do they compare to one another? So definitely happy to bring back as much of that as this committee's interested in. Obviously, there's a lot there, and some folks have more interest than others in the data side. But Steve, I imagine you are one of those that has more interest. So definitely happy to provide as much as that as folks want.
I don't know how others feel, but I would love to track along.
All right, do people feel that they have asked enough questions to go into the breakout rooms to answer a couple of questions around what comes up for you as you look at these design options and think about equity? Do people feel that they have enough to go into the small groups? Okay, so I see Lily's thumbs up. So I think, okay, and I see Sabrina's thumbs up and maybe a few others. So how about we do that? Why don't we go into the small groups? And we have 2 small groups with note takers, and we may not have time for report out. So the note taking is very important.
And let me pop up the discussion questions again.
And Dr. Hunt, do you want to stick with the original 30 minutes?
No, thank you. If we could go for 20 minutes, that would be good. Or 24. Let's go for 24, and then we'll come back and go directly into the equity framework.
Okay, sending you all to your breakout rooms now. Welcome to those joining on YouTube. Our group is still in small group discussion for the next, looks like 9 minutes or so. But if you'd like to give public comment, we ask that you would dial in to 253-215-8782. The meeting ID is 986-0940-5983. The passcode is 701376. Once you're in the meeting, you'll be put in a waiting room. You'll be admitted when it's time for public comment. Dial *9 to raise your hand, and a facilitator will call on you to provide your public comment. It is *6 to unmute. Please provide your name and affiliation, and everyone's given about 2 minutes to speak unless we get an abundance of calls. Again, please give a call to 253-219-8782. The meeting ID is 986-0940-5983. The passcode is 701376. And dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. And I'll leave this up for anyone who wants to jump into the queue for public comment. We do have a few more items left on the agenda before public comment, so just be aware you could be in the waiting room for quite some time. Hey, Matt, do you remember, wait for you to connect the audio first. Hey, Matt, do you remember, were you in group 1 or group 2?
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry for the very abrupt end, but thank you for giving your feedback, and we do welcome your any follow-up questions or concerns that come up. Please email the IBR team or email Jake, and the team really appreciates your thinking. I also want to shift to Chris Lepe. Chris, you are going to take us away with the recommendations development in relation to the equity framework. So Chris and team.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, there we go. Couldn't find the buttons there on the bottom. Hey everybody, how's it going? Chris Lepe on the team here. I'm going to be co-presenting with Emily today, Emily Peralta, just about some of the changes that have taken place with the equity framework since our last meeting. If we can go to the next slide. There's a few pieces of additional content that have been incorporated. The main thing is this section on accountability mechanisms, and Emily is going to be walking us through some of those kind of key components. We also have a further description of the physical design objective, and aside from that, just some language tweaks here and there. If we go to the next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Emily because this is really the meat of the changes in the framework based on the input that we received from our last EAG meeting. So Emily, would you like to share out, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. So in this section, we outlined examples of different mechanisms that can be developed and implemented to ensure that equity is integrated into the decision-making process. So we pulled directly from your feedback in the group discussions at the last EAG meeting to develop these recommendations. While the internal processes may vary between the various IBR program teams, the priorities and the goals for accountability are consistent across all facets of the management and the development of the program. And we have run these recommendations by members of the program staff and various technical teams, and they've given us positive feedback and are on board with what we developed. So I'm going to go through these different elements. First is staff progress reports. This could be quarterly reviews conducted by the different program teams to assess their application of the equity framework at various decision points. And the teams could then publish progress reports based on these assessments. Next is the accountability dashboard. So we could expand the existing accountability dashboard to include a page dedicated to equity reporting. We imagine that this would include data and information related to the equity performance measures that we're establishing, and could also host the progress reports mentioned in the last point. Next would involve updates from the program administrator. So Greg could dedicate a portion of the regular updates to the EAG meetings to include a report on how the equity framework is being applied to program decisions. This could be followed by an opportunity for the EAG to give feedback. And we envision this as a way to facilitate a continuous iterative process. Next is the equity lens adaptations. So we can work with various program and technical teams to adapt the equity lens tool in the framework as needed to use during their decision-making processes. Next, in relation to procurement practices, the program will require prospective contractors to demonstrate their commitment to equity and how they will incorporate the framework into their practices. And finally, the equity framework will be formally incorporated as an element of agreements with governmental partners and with the community benefits agreement. And I'll send it back to you, Chris.
That's perfect. Thank you.
One thing real quick, I'll jump in and just want to make sure it's clear. These are things we are going to do, and we have as Emily said, we have buy-in of staff and leadership that these are the actual action items, the things we will be delivering.
Yes, very important. Thank you, Jake. Not only did we take the input from the last EAG meeting, but we also vetted that internally. So that's really important. So the next steps, just some sort of final wrap-up steps for the equity framework include the acknowledgement of harm inflicted on Indigenous peoples in the area. That'll be developed in consultation with tribal leaders and the IBR tribal liaison. We also are going to be incorporating references and the contributor section. So we've been kind of holding off on that, but we'll be ironing that out as well. Making it pretty. So we'll be doing a little bit of just essentially kind of modifications to the document to make it more readable and kind of easier to grasp visually. And then ADA remediation. So with that, I wanted to take a pause before we go into the group discussion in case there are any clarifying questions for myself, for Jake, for Emily, or anybody else on the equity team that was involved with this last round of edits.
This is Matt. I have a question about working with companies and them demonstrating their commitment to equity. Could you elaborate a little bit more about like what exactly you'll be looking for them to demonstrate and what that process might look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm gonna look to Jonelle or
happy to jump
Jake
in
on this one. Mm-hmm.
You always give me the easy ones, Chris. You know, there's an old adage, the best predictor of future action is past action. So one of the things that we could take a look at during the construction phase, as well as various phases that require contractual arrangements, is, for example, ask potential contractors to share with us their own workforce diversity, to share with us the sort of efforts that they have either operationalized or not relative to DEI. So that's one example. And as well as during the construction phase, always asking contractors to put together what's called a subcontractor utilization plan, which essentially indicates who do you anticipate working with, and we can do the same thing for workforce. So for example, we anticipate having some pretty rigorous workforce requirements across all of our specific areas relative to our equity definition. We would want to know how they've done that on other projects. So those are just some examples, but Greg, I know you probably have some other ideas.
Yeah, and we talked about not letting how we bid the projects be a detriment to having contractors that can do good work and accomplish the things we need to see accomplished. So not making all of our contracts low bid, but make them quality-based selections based on the qualities that we give priority to. So, and including having both penalties and incentives for contractors who perform well and do better than we anticipate. So carrots and sticks.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you for that additional information there as it relates to that question. Any other clarifying questions before we dive into kind of meat of the matter with the IBR equity framework?
Meg.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, this is Meg. I think we might have touched on it a little bit last time, but in regards to contractors for this project, how early are we going to let them know that these are expectations, so that if they are not going to be able to meet their, like if they couldn't possibly meet that mark, that we're asking them to now, to give them time enough to update their workforce, to have better equity processes so that they could ask for that bid?
So the first thing we have to do is we've got to get a project first. Contractors are generally not interested in this environmental and planning phase that we're in, but once we get commitments that this is going to be a project, then we start having meetings with the contractors, with this group, with the community advisory group, so they understand what what this region values. So this is, I would say sometime in 2023, going into 2024, you will start seeing those type of meetings taking place to start getting folks ready to participate on these type of projects, or on this project specifically, rather.
And just to add, if I may, Greg and I and others on the project team have been invited to sort of showcase the wonderful work coming out of this committee, both locally as well as nationally. And so I think it's being socialized that equity is a core component, not only a core value, but a core outcome of what we expect in any sort of future contracting. So in large part, a lot of that has already started. I think for any contractor paying attention, or any contractor wanting to do work with IDR, I think understanding the work that's coming out of this committee, as well as other groups, is going to, I think, make it clear that we are expecting to move the dial and to set a new watermark.
Very good. So if it's okay, I wanted to make sure we focus in on the group discussion question, which is there anything else you need to see before recommending delivery to the program? This is, again, obviously in relation to the equity framework. So how baked is this in your opinion? And is there anything else that you feel you need to see before we recommend delivery to the program? Your thoughts? Including, I'll just say, as it relates to the accountability section, like, how are you feeling about that?
So let me make sure. Was that question for staff, or
for the group, for the larger group? And I see actually Lily's hand is up, so feel free to jump in, Lily. That's okay.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the accountability section, I like all the ideas a lot. I guess in order to really know how I feel about them, I think I need to hear a little bit more about the carrots and the sticks, and about the implementation of each of the strategies. I mean, people here will not be surprised that I'm a big fan of dashboards, being a data analyst, and I have a lot of opinions on how dashboards should go and what should be in them. And so I'd be happy to like give a strong, like, yeah, dashboards are great, but to really endorse a plan, I think I need a little bit more information.
So Chris, one question that I'm having is, this is just my a question in my head. If we're going to have a labor management community oversight committee, when we think about workforce and contracting, I'm just wondering about, it might be something to put in as a possibility.
And part of the question that I have is how specific
do we want to get?
Should we be getting, as it
Yeah.
relates to the section on accountability? Like, what's the right level of information and direction versus getting a little bit too much into the weeds? So I don't know. I mean, it is a question for all of us here. I don't necessarily have an opinion one way or the other.
Group, your opinion is being asked for.
Sabrina?
Hi, it's Sabrina from Metro. I guess I'm wondering, I'm happy to see the accountability mechanisms fleshed out. And I guess I'm wondering, I just still have a question about how it fits into the larger process. And like, so when's the first thing that we're going to see come out of the equity framework? Like, what's our next benchmark, or where will it first be incorporated into the process?
I think Jake and Janelle can actually speak a little bit to that. I mean, my understanding is that the framework is already being utilized in some of the planning that's taking place. But I will say that performance measures, the development of the performance measures, equity performance measures, is next in line, or one of those things that is very close to being next in line. Matter of fact, I believe we're going to be diving into those at the next EAG meeting. So, okay. But to your point, kind of being, I guess, so what I'm hearing is some kind of timeline or timetable, to the extent possible, showing how each of these components of the equity framework fits in over the arc of the project. Is that?
Yeah, I think that would be great, because we have seen, we've seen that overall timeline. And I think, for both transparency and accountability, I think it would be great to overlay this on the process.
I think it's a great suggestion, and we will task our team to look at how the framework and the elements that are being developed here fits into the overall schedule of getting this delivered. We know some of the things that are the tangibles of DBE percentages during construction. Mm-hmm. Those things are going to come later in the process.
Sure.
But we can lay that out for how some of these things will fit into the overall picture. So it's a good comment.
Thank you.
And I would just add, I think one of the first products will be relative to the equity specific screening criteria that is an element of the framework that the EAG will receive shortly as we undergo that screening. But Jake, it looked like you were going to try to comment as well.
I was just going to say that we're working to, like Greg said, we're actually developing a decision kind of matrix type tool where we are really mapping out over the next several years what those major decisions are. And so I'm working with those folks who are really intimately involved with that to say, okay, what does this mean, and how do we show how the equity framework was applied and how it impacted these decisions. So that'll be certainly one piece. But I would also echo what Chris said, and that we are implementing it in terms of, the definition was a key piece of this framework. The objectives are a key piece of this framework. So yeah, but mapping it out in more detail, yes, we'll do that and try to make that much more clear for folks.
Thank you.
Looks like Dr. Nakana.
Yes, thank you. So I think one of the questions we are trying to address today is to get consensus to say, okay, move on with the equity framework, correct? It's going to be passed on.
and exactly. Wait, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, all right. And then I'm good with that. I think we have kind of a robust framework. I would like to see it operationalized and hear from it. My only question here is about community benefit agreements. and this screening tool. The way I understand the community benefit agreement, and then using this as an outcome of that agreement, I'm a bit lost, because the way I understand the community benefit agreement is that, you know, you make an agreement with the community about a certain aspect. So I'm not seeing the connection between this framework, it being an outcome of a community benefit agreement. Am I missing something?
And I can add a little commentary. So I think next month, when we start to roll up our sleeves on the key performance indicators, that is going to be the foundation in many ways of the community benefits agreement. So we'll have specific workforce performance measures, for example, and those measures we'll want to have negotiated and what we want to see in terms of workforce relative to the community benefits. For example, we'll have robust targets relative to DBE and contracting participation. We'll have to have a conversation relative to what do we do with ancillary property once the project is complete, and what's the highest and best use from the community's perspective of those properties. So those are all elements that will derive from the guidance that the framework offers, again, relative to the 6 equity objectives we have. Does that kind of make sense?
Kind of. And I only bring this up because if you enter in that will be contractual with the community. So how does, would it be contractual that this framework will also be part of? I mean, I just don't, but yeah.
That would be the goal. And Greg, I know you've been thinking a lot about this, but any additional thoughts?
Yeah, so the elements of the framework will appear in a community benefits agreement. That's an enforceable agreement. It will appear in intergovernmental agreements. So we think that there will be a number of places where it shows up, but yeah, the community benefits agreement will be key critical, because that's going to talk about pre-apprenticeship programs. That's going to talk about DBE pre-training and support elements. So all of those things that are going to be, that you guys are going to help develop, are going to be a part of a mechanism that gets enforced on contractors in design during operations. So it's kind of, we're going to spread it and sprinkle it throughout the project to make sure that it is getting in the appropriate places and that it can be enforced.
I hate to cut us off right here, but we do have public comment. And so I want to pivot to public comment, and thank you, everyone. Comment instructions: to make a verbal comment, to make a live comment via phone, dial 253-215-8782. Our meeting ID is 986-0940-5983. Passcode 701376. Dial *9 to raise your hand. The facilitator will call on participants to provide comment. Dial *6 to unmute yourself. Please provide your name and affiliation. Commentators will be given 2 minutes to speak. And if we run out of time and you have not had a chance to speak, you can still provide comments after the meeting.
And I think before moving on to the next slide, I believe we do have folks lined up. Is that correct, Brent?
Yeah, we have 2.
Let's have them do it, and then we can show the instructions for submitting after the meeting.
And last number 7284, please provide your public comment. 7284. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Hello, my name is Yukaya Halloran-Steiner. I'm 16 years old and an organizer with Sunrise PDX. And I know you all have taken a fair amount of steps to make this project more equitable. And the potential addition of new sustainable public transit is a really amazing first step. But I want to encourage you to put more thought into the climate justice aspect of this issue. Adding any lanes, including auxiliary lanes, to the current layout of this bridge leads to more car space and therefore more cars. It's easy science, it's called induced demand, and no matter how much you greenwash this project, we know that more lanes do not decrease congestion in the long run. It actually leads to more cars and more carbon emissions. And as you continue to plan and review this project, I urge you to remember that no matter how many alternative transportation, if you add lanes and add car infrastructure, further polluting the climate crisis, this project is not equitable. I am concerned because Black, Brown, Indigenous, rural, low-income, queer, and disabled people are affected first and most by the climate crisis. I am concerned because I'm 16 years old and have to live the rest of my life in this world longer than any of you. I'm concerned because my future is quite literally in your hands, and I am scared of what you might do with it. And I hope that when you log off this call, you remember my shaky voice. I hope that as you make dinner for your nieces and nephews, you talk on the phone with your grandkids, or you tuck your own kids into bed tonight, you think about the impact that this project will have on their futures. If this project is adding lanes, it is adding emissions. This infrastructure isn't equitable if it threatens our futures. Thank you.
Thank you. And looks like we have the last numbers of 6044.
Low income, queer, and disabled people are affected first.
And it looks like we have the delay from YouTube, but last numbers of 6044.
Longer than any of you. Because my future is and I'm scared of what
looks like they're listening on YouTube, Roberta. So, but the last number is 6044 if you'd like to give your public comment.
I hope that as you
I'm going to ask to unmute them.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes,
we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I hit *6 and it said I was muted, but anyway, good evening, everyone. My name is Paxton Rothwell. I'm 27 years old and I'm an organizer with Sunrise PDX. I'm scared for my future. When I talk to other young people, they feel the same. They feel scared, tired, jaded, and disempowered. Climate change will make our world unlivable in our lifetimes, and that's a consequence that most decision makers today do not have to face. Not their future that their bad policy decisions will ruin. It's ours. It's mine. We don't have any political sway to change the status quo except joining these obscure government meetings. That, to me, is not equitable. So I'm hoping you will push my viewpoint onward today. Adding lanes to a freeway will only lead to more driving. There's plenty of science behind it. It's called induced demand, and I strongly suggest you all look it up. More space for cars means cars will come to fill them. More cars means more driving. More driving means more warming emissions, regardless of if the cars are in congestion or if they're moving. More driving also leads to increased dangerous driving behavior. And in the end, it's the same car that will travel on this larger freeway that will speed through a stop sign in your neighborhood and slay your neighbor. The advisory group needs to talk about the generational impacts of climate equity here. With the science behind global warming becoming clearer and clearer each day, and noting that this project will undoubtedly increase the vehicle miles traveled and will contribute to climate change, how can this group really say that this project is equitable to future generations? If this project is built, it will continue contributing to the sunk cost of a car-dependent world. It will directly contribute to the unpredictable climate, famine, and wildfires that the human race is soon to experience and that we're already experiencing today. Doesn't that scare you to know that younger generations are being saddled with the knowledge that their future is being sold for a quick profit? Question what you're being sold by the IBR leadership group. Question the data the DOTs are telling you, and use your position on this committee to fight for climate equity, because you are our only hope. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we are going to close public comment now. And next slide, Jake, or is there a next slide?
Yep, is that showing to submit comment after the meeting?
To submit comment after the meeting, please fill out the comment form on the program website or email your comments to info@interstatebridge.org with EAG Public Comment in the subject line. Call 888-503-6735 and state EAG Public Comment in your message. Written comments need to explicitly say EAG Public Comment in the subject line or in the body of the messages for them to be identified and distributed to EAG members. All written comments must be received prior to 48 hours in advance of each upcoming meeting in order to be distributed to advisory group members. Comments received after that point will be distributed to members in advance of their next meeting. All right, next slide. So our wrap up, please post the survey. So quickly, how did it go? Our next meeting is going to be Monday, December 20th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. We will be talking more about climate and equity and performance measures. Also, for your future calendar, January 17th, 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. is our meeting for January. So I want to wrap up. We're 3 minutes over. Thank you very much for all of your participation. Thank you for our commenters, and good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Everyone have a
Thank you.
wonderful holiday break. See you soon.